In 1815, French control of Italy came to an end with the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo and his final exile to St. Helena. All his boundary changes were thrown aside. The European powers meeting at the Congress of Vienna in 1815 decided to return Italy to the boundaries of more or less what they had been in the middle of the 18th century before Napoleon arrived. The main divisions in Italy would be as follows. In the north, Piedmont was restored to its king, Victor Emmanuel I. His territory was now enlarged to include Savoy, recovered from France, and Genoa. The Vienna Settlement of 1815 gave Piedmont control of the former Republic of Genoa. This was a great commercial benefit to Piedmont as Genoa was an important port. But the Genoese were far from impressed, resenting the loss of their former political and commercial independence. Elsewhere in the north, Lombardy and Venetia were now joined together under a new viceroy controlled from Vienna. The central duchies, Tuscany, Modena, and Parma, were returned to the control of Austrian-appointed local rulers. For example, Ferdinand III, the brother of the Austrian emperor, became the Grand Duke of Tuscany. The Papal States were returned to the control of the Pope, although now Austrian armed forces were to be stationed there. In the south, King Ferdinand I was restored to the throne, controlling both Naples and Sicily. He was in theory independent, but he accepted that no important change would be made to his government without Austria's approval. The result was Italy was largely controlled by Austria, as the Congress of Vienna had intended. The Congress had decided that after all the upheaval, stability was needed. This meant a return to the old ways. Above all, future French invasions had to be prevented, and that meant Austrian control of the peninsula. This was very much in accordance with what Metternich wanted. He wished to extinguish the spirit of Italian unity and ideas about constitutions. In 1815, the old ruling families returned to Italy from exile in which most of them had lived out the Napoleonic era. They were anxious, now that their old state boundaries had been restored, to return to their privilege and previous lifestyles. It was not long before kings, princes, dukes, and duchesses were finding their way back to Italy. They were welcomed back by the land-owning aristocrats, the Catholic Church, and the middle class. For all of these, it signaled a return to the old ways. Yet, with very few exceptions, the peasants, who made up about 90% of the population, neither knew nor cared what was happening outside their own villages. Whether it was the French, the Austrians, or the restored monarch who ruled was of little or no importance to them. The restored monarchs have long been seen by historians as trying to turn back the clock of progress. Hence, they have been judged as essentially reactionary. Their alliance with the Church and also their general friendliness with the Habsburg government in Austria has led historians to write off the restored monarchs as old-fashioned and unprogressive. Between 1815 and 1861, when Italy was unified, the social upheaval and revolutions that took place were recently described by historians as a struggle between progress and reaction. New research by revisionist historians suggests a different situation. They argue that only in a few states and only on a few occasions did restoration governments react harshly. Most of the opposition came because popular demands for a part in government were being ignored. The real trouble was just the opposite. It was not because monarchs were keeping too much power in their own hands, but because they were modernizing their governments and setting up a central administration to carry out everyday business. Admittedly, most restoration governments used censorship, police surveillance, military force to deal with unrest, but so did most other European countries. For example, in Tuscany, Ferdinand III was no reactionary. He improved education, reorganized universities, and even spent more on the education of girls. He also expanded health facilities and refused to allow Jesuits entry into his duchy. Above all, he allowed freedom of expression to a degree not seen elsewhere in Italy. In Parma, Duchess Marie-Louise was the standard of the time, another enlightened ruler. She repealed the Code Napoleon, but replaced it with something very similar and would allow no policy of blind reaction. Although there were 4 states that were indeed backward-looking: Piedmont, Modena, the Papal States, and Naples. When Victor Emmanuel I returned to Piedmont in 1815, he set to turn back the clock. Middle-class officials in government and law courts and non-noble officers in the army who had been appointed under Napoleon were fired and replaced by members of the old noble families. In addition, the Code Napoleon was done away with. As well, the king even went to the lengths of plowing up parks and tearing down gas lights because they had been introduced by the French. Victor Emmanuel I went even further. The old custom barriers were introduced, and the use of new roads built by the French was actively discouraged. Control of education was handed back to the Roman Catholic Church, and the Jesuits, who had been exiled by Napoleon, were invited to return. Nobles were given back their lands, and at the same time, the old anti-Jewish laws restricting ownership of property were reintroduced, and Jews were once again ordered to remain in the ghettos instead of being allowed to move freely about the country. The return of Duke Francis IV of Modena in 1815 had similar results of reactionary government. Italians holding government offices under Napoleon were removed, being replaced by members of the nobility. The Jesuits were invited back. Francis also married the daughter of Victor Emmanuel I. He hated all liberals, and yet he also had quarrels with Austria. He was resentful that his rule was confined to the small duchy of Modena. A series of hardline popes, known collectively as the Zealots, between them established a tight hold on government, education, culture, and politics within the Papal States. All central and local government was in the hands of priests. The lay population had no rights. The Code Napoleon was abolished. Censorship was strictly imposed, and all opposition forcibly repressed. The Inquisition sometimes used torture against those whose ideas were deemed too modern. It was even forbidden to say that the earth revolved around the sun, since the Church decreed otherwise. Religious persecution increased, and toleration of any belief other than Roman Catholic doctrine was forbidden. Jewish people in particular were targeted. Their children could be taken away to be brought up as Catholics by the Church if it could be shown, or sometimes even if it was alleged, that anyone, a friend, a servant, or a relative, or a stranger, had baptized them secretly. Developments in communication were also hindered by the Pope's refusal to allow railways and the telegraph within his lands. In this period, the Papal State had an unenviable reputation of being the most backward and oppressive of all Italian states. They were also among the most economically poor, with unemployment and begging being common. The Bourbon king Ferdinand I returned as King of Naples in 1815. The following year, he canceled the Sicilian Constitution of 1812, which allowed the people a say in government. In the future, he declared Sicily would be governed as part of the Kingdom of Naples. Liberals and radicals joined together to call for a new constitution, but the king refused their demand. In Naples, too, Ferdinand's rule was oppressive, cruel, and reactionary, and there were very few economic successes that perhaps might have compensated for the stifling political atmosphere. In 1820, in Naples and Sicily, there began the first of a long, drawn-out series of revolutions.